Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to the Howard County Chamber's Preparing to Open webinar series, and we will get started momentarily. So while everyone continues to join us, we will get started out of respect for everyone's time. Thank you for joining us. I'm Leonardo McClarty. I'm the president of the Howard County Chamber, and want to welcome each of you to our second part of Preparing to Open, where today we will talk about facilities management as we all deal with COVID-19 and ultimately get ready to go to physically back to our respective offices and places of work. We have a great panel that has been assembled today with a wide variety of experiences, both here in Howard County, the greater Baltimore area, as well as also nationally. And so we will be talking on a number of different issues and so forth as over the next hour or so. And so without further ado, I'm going to start by introducing our panelists. And so the first person, I'm just going to go alphabetically, although, excuse me, and then start with Nick Barrick, who is the regional practice leader in the land development practice for KCI. And Nick is a licensed civil engineer and lead AP with 16 years of experience as a civil engineering consultant working in KCI Site Facilities Division. He's the regional practice leader for the land development practice, overseeing land development and building structures work nationwide. He works in site layout, grading, water, sewer, storm drain design, stormwater management, sediment control, lead design, zoning document preparation, public hearings, and presentations. His project list consists of projects in the residential, commercial, institutional, municipal, parks and rec, and government space. Nick also will be the chair coming into this year of our Young Professionals Network program. And so with that, it's certainly a pleasure to introduce to you Nick Barrick. Next, we have Karen Cherry, and Karen is the Vice President of Office Leasing for the Howard Hughes Corporation. She oversees the leasing activity in the office for portfolio in Columbia, Maryland, consisting of 1.8 million square feet of existing office space, in addition to approximately 4 million square feet of future development. She has over 20 years of experience in the commercial real estate industry, focused primarily on landlord representation in the Baltimore-Washington corridor. Prior to joining Howard Hughes, she was a principal at Lee & Associates, Chesapeake Region, and also heavily held brokerage positions with Cushman & Wakefield and the Trammell Crow Company. In 2020, she was named the Daily Records list of top 100 women in Maryland, which was our second time joining that list, having first appeared in 2017. And so it's my pleasure to introduce to you Karen Cherry. Next, we have to us Milton Matthews. And Milton joined the Columbia Association as president and CEO in June of 2014. Prior to CA, he was the CEO for the Reston Association in Reston, Virginia from 2004 to 2013. Milton has more than 23 years of experience in local government administration and management, including the following: the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, town of Westerfield, Connecticut, city of Dallas, Texas, city of Syracuse, New York. And Milton has a number of different postgraduate degrees. And so again, it is certainly a pleasure to introduce to you Milton Matthews. And last, but certainly not least, is Matt Wilson. And Matt is the Regional Vice President, Mid-Atlantic Region for the RMR Group. As of March 31st, 2020, RMR managed companies combined have $32 billion of assets under management. Matt oversees the Mid-Atlantic region, which consists of approximately 15 million square feet in 6 states and the District of Columbia. Prior to joining the RMR Group, Matt was a vice president for First Potomac Realty Trust, overseeing the leasing and operations of the Maryland portfolio for more than 10 years. And before that, Matt was a senior leasing executive with Trammell Crow Company for 17 years. He has more than 30 years of commercial real estate services experience in the greater Baltimore region. In addition, he is the member of the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors and the National Association of Industrial and Office Properties, NAIOP, and is a 2010 graduate of Leadership Howard County Premier, which I also know that Karen is a graduate as well. And so I know both of them can argue about whose class was the best ever. And so with that, thank you all for joining us today, and we will get ready to jump right in. For those of you, again, on the call, I'm going to ask for questions if you would use the Q&A section as opposed to the chat line, as it will make it easier for us to follow the questions being asked. We are recording the event today, and so we'll also have that up on the Chamber's YouTube later this afternoon. And so this first question is going to go for all of our panelists, and that is, with the pandemic of the novel COVID-19 virus, how are things changing for you in terms of property management or facility management? Specifically, what concerns do you have now that you didn't have before? And so perhaps what we'll do is start with Karen, followed by Matt, and then we'll go to Milton and Nick. So Karen.
Thanks, Leonardo. This question is kind of a broad one, so I don't want to take up too much time, but just in general, as a property owner, we are concerned about facilitating once the governor and the county executive allow offices and retailers to be back in an open standpoint. We want to facilitate a safe environment for our tenants. And so, we are currently investigating what does that mean? And I think it's going to mean something different depending on what type of property you're talking about. So for an office property, the janitorial requirements are going to be increased. Social distancing is probably going to be a thing for the foreseeable future. So how do we help facilitate social distancing when you're talking about common lobbies of buildings and elevator usage and things like that? So, we're looking at what are the best practices out there. We're taking a lot of advice from those countries who have already started opening. So if you look at, best practices in Asian countries that are reopening and going back to an office environment there, we're relying on consultants to help us figure out what does that look like. But we foresee that, we're going to probably have to limit the amount of people that are in an elevator at one time. And so, how do you do that? Is it with a lobby attendant? Is it with signage? Is it with a combination of those things? Because there's also cost involved in all of those different considerations. So there's a lot that we're looking at. There's a lot that we're taking into consideration. And that's on the office side. On the retail side, a majority of our restaurants are open for curbside pickup and delivery services, but those retailers who aren't able to be open, once they are able to be open, what are the parameters based on what type of a company they are? So there's really a lot that goes into, answering that question depending on what area you're talking about.
Leonardo, you might be on mute.
I muted myself. From a property management or facility management perspective, just again, what concerns perhaps do you have now that maybe you didn't have before?
So I'll take that. So Leonardo, thanks first off for having me on this panel, and good afternoon to everybody. I think the challenges really are, there are a lot, and I think as Karen touched on, I won't say the same things she did, but and try to hit on some other areas, but this is going to be a completely evolving situation, and we're going to just constantly be following CDC consultants and gaining direction on how we're going to tackle these problems. Some of the things we're doing now is just requiring our vendors who routinely access our buildings to adopt self-monitoring protocols for their employees and prohibiting any of their employees who have symptoms of COVID-19 from entering the buildings. We're also changing protocols on how we have interactions with our tenants, where to minimize those social interactions, our management offices are not going to be accepting walk-in visitors unless an emergency arises. We're really recommending that they utilize our online maintenance portals for any service requests. Some of those service calls we're going to prioritize and maybe addressing some of them after normal business hours, again, to limit social interactions of our staff and tenants' employees. We are requiring RMR employees, building engineers who are in the buildings to continue to wear PPE when servicing all the buildings. And some of the other things that you'll see in our buildings, especially during these early stages, is building amenities are shut down, such as fitness centers, shared conference facilities, and removing or minimizing furniture in common area lobbies. Again, all of this done to help with minimizing the social interactions.
And so, Milton, if you would take the same question.
Yes, for us, can you hear me? When you think about our facilities, our facilities are tied to recreation, fitness, gathering. And so for us, number one is going to be the safety and the health of our team members, our employees, and all of our guests and members who come from our facilities. And so, given what our mission and purpose is, our focus is when we reopen is finding a ways to make sure that those individuals who come to our facilities, that mission and purpose is still fulfilled, but we have to do it in a safe and healthy way. Right now, in phase one of the governor and the county executive lifting the restrictions, we have our 2 golf courses open and we have 2 of our outdoor tennis facilities. So we have a start in welcoming members and guests and others back to our facilities. But it's going to be constantly evolving for us. We're looking forward to the opportunity of reopening our fitness centers. We have before and after school programs. And so we have camps and we have childcare facilities in our fitness centers. So it's constantly for us looking at best practices in our respective industries, whether it's golf, fitness. We also emphasize who's using our facilities, whether they're children, they're older adults, or whatever the case may be. So we're tailoring it all around best practices from the industry and also who's the users in our facilities.
Excellent. And Nick, if you would take that same question.
Sure. Well, thank you, Leonardo, for allowing me to be on the panel today. Good afternoon to everybody out there. I think so. KCI Technologies, for those who don't know, is a full-service engineering firm. So, from the engineering, construction, development standpoint, really we've been on our toes the entire time. It's been ever changing really on a daily basis between different projects and different states that we operate in. KCI has multiple offices all over the U.S. We work on projects nationwide. So. One of the really big struggles has just simply been staying up to date. We've had someone that has been updating an internal page for KCI that really gives us the breakdown day by day of how things are evolving, what businesses are open, what you are and are not allowed to do. And really it's been keeping us on our toes. As different states progressed and shut down different sectors or construction projects, it's been pivoting to where can that staff then go to work, and what can we focus on, what can't we focus on, and really making sure all of our employees, all 1,600 employees, really know what they should be doing out on the job site. So it has been difficult. We have done a pretty good job of being able to pivot on a daily basis, and we're looking to come out of this stronger.
Thank you, Nick. And so this next question will actually go to both Karen as well as to Matt. And so various reports, whether it's things you read or if you're watching. I'm a big Today Show guy or what have you, and ultimately they've interviewed various office, developers or folks that handle property management, leasing, and so oftentimes they're showing as an example one-way entries, plexiglass separating cubicles, just to say the least. And so perhaps if you would share with us maybe just overall what the office industry is suggesting businesses do to balance both productivity and collaboration with public health, because certainly I think we've seen over the last few years there's been this big move to co-working and collaborative spacing, and now all of a sudden we're having to try to separate that. So if you would just kind of talk about that as well, and maybe if there are any resources or websites or things that businesses can visit that can maybe provide some additional guidance as to how they best might deal with some of these new challenges. So maybe Karen, if you go first.
Sure, happy to. So I'll give you two sites that we have gone to kind of as a reference. Cushman & Wakefield has done a really good job with what they call the 6-foot office. And that describes a lot of what you're talking about, where there are certain directional paths throughout the office space, and how do you reconfigure some of the open seating areas, those benching models that have become so popular these days. How do you reconfigure that without spending a lot of money to accommodate, the social distancing, the 6-foot rules? And then Gensler has also done a lot of research in this area. So those are really the two places that we have gone. Cushman & Wakefield and Gensler have been great resources for us kind of to figure that out. The industry as a whole is really, I don't know that the industry has landed on an answer to this yet. And I think each office and each office user is really trying to figure out what makes the most sense for their culture. One of the things that we're realizing is that these Zoom meetings do work pretty well. There are some organizations that will continue the work from home model more than they would have prior to COVID-19. There are other organizations where in-person interaction is much more conducive to their business model and their culture within their organization. So I would say that each company is going to have to figure out that balance for themselves of, do they continue to allow more work from home, flexible type schedules, or do they have their people coming back into the office? A lot of companies are recommending kind of an A-team, B-team model where only half of the staff comes into the office on any given day. So those are some of the things that I've heard office users investigating. Matt, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just.
Thank you. And Matt?
Yeah, thank you guys. And so exactly, Karen, great points. And I do agree with you. Gensler and Cushman are great resources. There's multiple other ones out there. And like Karen said, first and foremost, each business needs to assess their own needs. Every space design is unique. And so, you really need to, if there's not one answer out there for anybody. So for example, at RMR Group, we have a lot of private offices, and that helps in these types of scenarios. We have very few cubes, but as we think through our plan, because we have to obviously prepare for our buildings for opening, but also our own offices. And we're going to come back and have a rotating schedule with employees that we're not stressing the capacity in the spaces. We're going to make sure people aren't sitting within 6 feet of each other. And there are other things that we're putting in place. One of the big things for us too is business continuity planning and just making sure leadership is separated, and those are types of things to think about. As far as other resources, I know the Maryland Gov site has published a Maryland Back to Business, and they share best practices for businesses to reopen. I'd also say, we continue to follow and CDC guidance and guidance from OSHA. Those are out there that companies can review as they formulate their own plans. and again, regarding specific space configuration needs, you know, there's a whole group of architects out there that I'm sure could be great resources for companies.
Thank you. And excuse me. And on the same note, as we talk about just these maybe shared spaces or what have you, just going to ask both Karen and Matt one more question before we kind of shift directions here. But and actually, this next question, I'm going to maybe have a dovetail on another. But you know, in an office setting, you know, property managers often have, you know, various suites and public spaces cleaned by a janitorial crew. And so, what instructions, I guess, maybe should be given, or and I guess I'll just ask you this way: what instructions should be given to cleaning crews in light of COVID-19? Maybe how might property management work with tenants when they want cleaning that perhaps goes beyond the norm? Just kind of how are you having these janitorial conversations? And on that related note, this is the question from the question and answer box. And it was also asking, and this was in general, not directed to any one person, but maybe since we're talking about janitorial, Matt, you and Karen can handle this one. And that is, how are you handling public restrooms? And so maybe Matt, you go first, followed by Karen.
Yeah, so a lot of questions in that one, but I think, you know, in general, we've implemented enhanced cleaning procedures in our buildings, focused on sanitizing all common area, high hand touch points. That includes the elevators, door opening poles, push panels, stair railings, restroom fixtures, things that come into high touch contacts throughout the day. We brought in extra day porters that are repeating those areas throughout the day. And you know, we've also established COVID-19 specific event protocols. So if there is a case of a reported event, we've got a process and procedure in place to address that. And that's, you know, to your point about, you know, if a tenant wants an extra cleaning in their space, it's certainly something we can arrange with them, which would be an additional cost to the tenant, but it is something we can accommodate them on. One of the things, you know, we're clearly focused on is making sure that our janitorial contractors maintain adequate supplies of disinfecting products. It's, you know, those are in high demand, but our groups have been able to leverage bulk buying, and we've been able to maintain the adequate supplies, because that's going to be critical. And I think one of the other things, you know, we just continue to follow CDC guidance. I'm going to keep saying that throughout today, but, you know, those guidance changes as we learn more about COVID-19. And so we're constantly following CDC guidance and also consulting with an internal hygienist. So that's driving a lot of our processes. And as far as bathrooms specifically, I think I touched on it. We're just doing extra cleanings throughout the day. And I'm not sure if that addressed that particular question.
So my response is pretty much ditto what Matt just said. And then I can answer a little bit more on the bathrooms, what we are doing specifically within our buildings. Where it's possible, we are shutting down every other sink and every other urinal, because those would be, you know, places where the social distancing would not be able to be done. There are certain buildings that can't accommodate, you know, that for whatever reason. So, you know, we have to kind of go on a case-by-case basis. We also have, like Matt mentioned, if a tenant desires extra cleaning within their space, we have, like, for example, if there's a confirmed case of COVID-19 within a tenant space and they want an extra cleaning done, there's actually a fogging technology that our janitorial staff utilizes. The space can be occupied within 12 hours of the fogging being done. So it can be an overnight process, and the tenant can then reoccupy the space the next day. So we found that that's, you know, pretty much all of the commercial janitorial companies have that type of technology that does a really deep sanitizing clean in that fogging technology. So that's one thing that, you know, if you're a tenant within within a building that has a janitorial service, you should definitely ask them about that technology.
Thank you. Thank you. And so we're going to maybe pivot a little bit and go to Milton at CA. And so Milton, I know, I think as you and I talked, I think you mentioned CA has 23 different facilities. I think that you manage and operate. And so, and those really, excuse me, go from health clubs to, you've got aftercare, you've got just all, you know, the other kind of, I guess, meeting spaces, or that are sometimes used for gathering and religious services and so forth. So perhaps for, I guess, maybe entities like you that may have multiple, I guess, uses perhaps, how are you managing the requirements related to these different uses? You know, just as an example, with the CA having so many different facilities that have so many different activities taking place.
Well, the first thing, and you're right, we have so many different facilities, and even within those many different facilities, we have different uses in there. And so the first thing we've done soon after, it was not long after we closed those facilities, we started thinking about reopening, because we were optimistic, thinking that eventually it would come. So the first step we took was come up with, as Matt had mentioned a number of times, just looking at the CDC guidelines, the OSHA guidelines, information we can pull from various sites, just to come up with a basic reopening plan that we can give to our individual operating units, and then have the team, train the team leaders on them. But then also, when those facilities are in advance of those facilities reopening, those team leaders then can add on to those different things, because the requirements for reopening for our fitness clubs going to be different from one of our meeting facilities, or from where we have our headquarters facility. But from the very beginning, just following those CDC guidelines, OSHA guidelines, other sources we have, and developing an reopening plan. Basically, HR did it, that we can provide to our team leaders, and then they can start customizing it for the various facilities. And as I mentioned earlier, for the various users that are going to be in those facilities. So the basic guidelines that we're offering into our team leaders, it covers signage, the appropriate personal protection equipment, hand sanitizing, frequent washing your hands, employee screening, and also just constantly cleaning. And that's part of the basic package.
And so Milton, staying on this, I guess maybe on the recreation side and so forth, this one question actually coming from our participants, and that is, it says, as particular counties are following different paths and timelines for reopening, where are you finding the best information particular to Howard County? And I guess maybe in this case, they're using an example of, you know, the state has given permission for outdoor fitness instruction, but has the county. And so maybe Milton, if you could talk a little bit about, because I know that some of the parks did open, I want to say maybe a couple of weeks ago. So any knowledge that you have as it relates, as an example, to county public parks or recreation facilities or anything like that you could share here?
Well, number one, yes, we're dealing with, when it comes to our facilities, as I said, our golf courses and our outdoor tennis facilities. But what we're looking at next, we have tot lots. They're a smaller version of what I call a playground. But going back to Howard County hasn't issued any guidelines for opening playgrounds yet. And so we have not opened those playgrounds. And so acknowledging that the state may say that playgrounds and parks could be open, but we're waiting for work with Howard County, because we want to make sure that we're in step with Howard County. Because what we had found, that going back very early, we left some of our tot lots open, but they became gathering places. And we saw that was a problem in the very beginning. And I think in conversations, that's one of the concerns that Howard County Parks and Recreation is having with their playgrounds. They don't want to run the risk of them becoming gathering places.
Yeah, and I know that was certainly something I think the county executive has mentioned on a few phone calls when the question arises, particularly as it relates to things of that nature, is that they quickly even came up as it relates to high schools and tracks and so forth, that they quickly become places where, you know, people really start gathering and so forth.
Well, Leonardo,
the last question I think on. Yes, go ahead.
Just to give you a quick example, one of the decisions I had to make is soon after the schools closed, and we have a lot of basketball courts, outdoor basketball courts. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to leave them open as an option for the kids out of school. But immediately we started getting complaints because they were gathering places. So we had to go in and take out the nets, take down the goals.
Wow. I guess I can't help but kind of make light. I guess for some kids, maybe not having nets would be a big deal. But in some places, if you, long as you have a goal, they don't mind not having nets.
Well, you remember I said take down the goals.
Yes, I heard you did say take down the goals as well. And so, Milton, just one last question while we're on kind of recreation. And this really actually pertains to health clubs. And so kind of just thinking, you know, the next few months, you know, certainly not now, but, you know, what should patrons perhaps expect to see in the future when they visit gyms and fitness facilities? As you're talking to your folks about CA and the like, what's that conversation like as it relates to, again, fitness and gyms and equipment? And are we going to see perhaps reduced capacity there as well? But just kind of share with us a little bit about our health and fitness facilities.
And once again, what we're trying to do is to get ahead of the decision. As you know, the gyms and fitness clubs are in phase 2, or the medium risk category for Governor Hogan. And then we have to work with Howard County government. But as soon as we have an idea that those facilities will be, the restrictions will be lifted, number one, we're going to hire firms to go in and do a thorough cleaning, because all 3 of our fitness clubs have been closed since mid-March. And following that, those outside contractors doing those thorough cleaning, we're going to come in with our own team members to do a cleaning in preparation for lifting those restrictions, opening the doors of those fitness clubs. But once those doors are open, yes, you're going to see new things. There are going to be no cash transactions. We are already invested in what we call these electrostatic spray guns for disinfecting our equipment. We're purchasing air purifiers for there are fans that will clean and disinfect an area. We're putting up social distancing signs where we're going to have certain equipment we're going to have where you can't have someone next to you. Classes where they may involve yoga or mats, we're not going to be sharing mats or things along that nature. There's going to be no food and beverages in any of our fitness clubs or the Haven on the Lake. There's going to be no towel services. And I know that in the past, those have been sensitive topics, but it's just the nature and the climate that we're working in right now.
Okay, wow. We may have to come back to a couple of those. Changing and switching subjects just slightly again and going to you, Nick. So, I believe from a facility standpoint, and this was touched on, I think Karen mentioned this maybe opening up, but, you know, so office buildings are often, you know, multi-story, you know, and for some, you know, perhaps taking stairs may not always be visible, well, I shouldn't say visible, but viable options. So, you know, from a maybe ventilation perspective and otherwise, how are elevators now being managed? You know, whether that's from a maybe capacity, cleaning, ventilation, what might we see there, or what's being done specifically in something that's such a confined and tight space?
So elevators are tough. Obviously, just like you said, you're in a confined space with other people. Generally, elevators could be one person, or, you know, you cram up everybody in to max them out. Obviously, moving forward, I don't see the maxing out of the elevator really happening From what we've seen, different organizations have really kind of settled on that 2-person number. I don't think there's anything hardline set, but that's generally speaking, 2 people has kind of been the new norm for an elevator. But I think you'll see people really moving forward, making that decision for themselves. Maybe people wait for that elevator ride for just that one person. So that also brings into, concerns of if there's a lot of people entering the building at one time, now your lobby may potentially be full or nearing capacity. So it does definitely bring into some other issues. As far as cleaning, obviously, they're used all the time. So there needs to be constant cleaning, a very rigorous program of multiple times a day being wiped down and made sure that they are as clean as can be. Some of the newer buildings, I know over in the Meriwether district, some of the new Howard Hughes buildings do have elevators where you don't even push a button. You walk in, and if you're a visitor, you tell the attendant in the lobby what floor you're going to, and they point to the elevator and it opens for you and takes you there. You don't have to touch anything. You may see newer buildings deploying those kind of technologies moving forward. As far as ventilation, that's a tough one because it all depends on the type of elevator. Some of the older ones may not have as good of ventilation as what some of the newer ones do. So there's definitely modifications that can be done. Obviously, for certain buildings, certain elevator types, you may be limited on what you can do. So really, the best path moving forward is limiting the number of people and cleaning them as frequently as possible.
Can I just jump in on that as well, Leonardo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the things that we have investigated in our older buildings that don't have that touchless technology is the touchless tool. Some people call it the COVID claw. And I just wanted to mention that it's about this big and it goes on your keychain. It's got a hook on one end with a little knobby thing at the edge of the hook. The hook you can grab doors and pull the doors with, and then the knobby thing you can push the buttons on the elevators. So I would suggest that anybody that is concerned personally about having those touch points within buildings, that you look into that. I know that Howard Hughes is looking at purchasing a large volume of the COVID claw. We're affectionately referring to it as, and we're going to distribute that throughout our tenant base so that they would have access to that for those older buildings that don't have the touchless technology.
It's funny when you mention that. I've seen those, but I've seen them only primarily on like on Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes you see some of those and you say, wow, that's actually really order it, and where is it coming from, and how long will it take for it to get to you? So glad to know that that's something that actually is actually working and so forth, and I can actually purchase.
Yes, it's a real thing, although they are in demand right now. So I would say we put in our order about 2 weeks ago and hope to get it in about 2 to 3 weeks. So there is some lag time on those orders for sure.
Okay, and so we're going to go to a few of these questions here in the Q&A box. And so this one says, ultimately, who is responsible for monitoring all the facilities and their cleaning codes? Will the local governments be issuing citations? And so maybe Nick, if you might take this one first, just to particularly, you guys get to work in a number of different states, so I know you're seeing this all over the place.
Sure. Well, I think the best answer to that is the local council person might be better suited to answer more of the more of that side. But I do kind of think there may be, depending on the jurisdictions, there may be regulations that are put into effect. Obviously, right now, I don't think there's anything in the law that specifically would allow government to come in and do citations. But like I said, certainly I could foresee that coming at some point, depending on the jurisdiction. I think the cleaning, really, it comes down to the building side of things, the building management to provide that cleaning. But again, depending on how it's leased out, depending on who the occupants are, that could vary as well.
And I think it's a shared responsibility. Okay. The building owners and the tenants really need to work in partnership now more than ever. The building ownership clearly has a responsibility for cleaning and maintaining the common areas of the building. The tenant has an obligation to clean and maintain their individual premises and space. So I think now is a time to, really work together to make sure that that you as a tenant have an understanding of what your building ownership is doing from an enhanced cleaning perspective, and then what you should be doing if you have additional concerns within your space.
And Leonardo, I would agree with that. CA, two of our facilities, including our headquarters and lease facilities. And to me, it's a working relationship with the owner of the building, and also us with, for example, at our headquarters right now, we have fewer staff because most of our staff are working from home. But eventually, there will be more in the building, and we're going to let the owner of our building to know what our expectations are. But we're going to work very closely with that owner also and follow the guidelines that the owner puts in place, because we're going to have our standards. We're seeing some of the things that are already happening in our building, even with a small number of staff we have in here now.
And then the last thing
Thank you. And this is another.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Matt.
Yeah, it's okay.
Let me move the Q&A so I can see.
Yeah, that's all right. I was just going to add, and I've said it before, though, really, it is just continuing to monitor CDC guidance, and that's, we're definitely on top of that, and we know it's going to evolve over time, and everything we're doing is in line with what the CDC guidance is.
And so this next question also is from the question and answer, and it says, this could be for anyone to answer. Have you heard of nanoseptic material that are self-cleaning coverings for door handles, elevator buttons, etc.? Any familiarity with those, with nanoseptic material?
No, I haven't.
So it looks like for the person that asked this one, there'll have to be some more research done on that one. And so shifting, and so this is a liability question here, and actually this was something we covered. I think we talked about it at some last week, but this question here also from the question and answer: will the liability fall on the business owner or the cleaning company if someone comes down with COVID and attributes it to your facility? And so and I think this is almost one of those that it has so many kind of it depends, I think, within it. And I know, as an example, I'm just going to speak to some of the things that were discussed last week on our call. And that is, first and foremost, I think it gets into some of the documentation that takes place in terms of what's been communicated to whether that's external visitors or to vendors or to employees coming in. If there have been, various postings, as both Matt and Karen touched on it, whether it's wearing masks, face covering, social distancing, certain instructions that maybe you might have placed in terms of, as an example, if someone was visiting perhaps the property management office and there's a sign up at least that says, leave things outside, we're not taking visitors. But I think that's where a lot of the communication and trying at least to do as much as you can to communicate to, again, customers, vendors, employees as to what are the standards in place, the protocols, the procedures, and then certainly being able to actually document it beyond just having signage up, but having also certain, at least policies that you can get your hands on to at least try to address some of those liability issues, because that is one of those big concerns right now. That's probably one of the major concerns as we talk with our colleagues at the U.S. Chamber and other chambers around the country, and even as you follow the debate in Washington about what protections should businesses have against people that may come down with COVID-19 or what have you, and so forth. So this is one that's going to be constantly ever evolving. And at least from one of the things that was touched on last week was, again, document, have, again, various postings and everything that you can, again, to just show that you're putting forth a good faith effort in communicating to, patrons, customers, employees, et cetera. And I guess maybe anything else that anyone else may want to add to that, but I think generally that's just a tough question to have just one specific answer to. But speaking of which, I think actually that kind of gives a good segue into Nick. Something I was reading recently was specific to KCI that says that, KCI has developed a customizable COVID screening application. And it says that it can be used by companies to assess employees and visitors for any symptoms prior to entering the building or job site. And so it's an app, I guess it's called the Readiness Screening Solution, or RSS, and so forth. So can you talk a little bit about, I guess, that app, I guess perhaps how it works, and just anything you can share on that end?
Sure. So KCI has a fairly large asset management and GIS division. We work typically with local jurisdictions providing real-time data on a whole host of items, from traffic maps you see to accident detection programs, security access tracking, building asset management, performance monitoring. So that group works with clients to build all sorts of custom applications and platforms and add-on programs to help best collect, interpret data into a nice, easily digestible format. For the RSS application, yes, KCI developed this tool really for both private and public sector clients to really support the need for COVID-19 screening activities. So the application is 100% customizable as well as scalable to really fit virtually any company or need you may have. It allows companies and agencies to query employees and visitors for symptoms before entering buildings or job sites. It generates reports and email notifications that can go out, and it can even collect geospatial data that could assist with contact tracing should an exposure event occur. Again, it's all customizable, so you could have that feature, you don't have to have that feature. So for instance, if there's an in-home service, if a company goes into various homes to perform their service, they could have their employee complete as informal as it could be on a piece of paper survey, it could be on a iPad documenting items as far as where are they, their temperature, how they feel. Again, totally customizable information that could input into the system. And then should a exposure event happen, you can then backtrace maybe where has that person been to kind of backtrace to cover ourselves from a tracing aspect. Really, like I said, the company can or agency can really customize this as much as possible. And from a deployment standpoint, if a company is interested, the whole from concept to deployment for the company can all happen within 24 hours. So it's pretty quick. These guys and gals that make this software are light years ahead of myself, I can say, but it's a neat program, and we have a lot of companies that are actually using it right now.
Wow, definitely sounds pretty cool. So we're getting close to being near our time, and so we're going to take a couple more questions that are from the question and answer. And so the first one, maybe I'm going to perhaps direct towards Milton, and this would be, and this ultimately says, they want to know, I guess now, what might be the employee screening process in the kind of in light of COVID. And so maybe Milton, as you perhaps have conversations maybe with your HR and so forth, how do you perhaps foresee things either changing, or what are just maybe the conversations that you're having as relates to an employee screening process? I'm thinking this would pertain to maybe onboarding, someone that you're hiring or what have you, in terms of trying to know what if they've been exposed or what have you to COVID-19 prior to them starting a job.
Well, just my conversations that I've had with the HR division, we know that we're going to be instituting what we call employee health questionnaire. That's going to be part of our onboarding process, but also it's going to be part of the process as we bring team members back to our facilities, because right now we have team members on furlough, 50% and 100%. And so as we start bringing them back health screening, that questionnaire is going to be a part of it. We're going to have an ongoing process where we can actually have the devices to check the temperatures. We're going to basically, where we can, and we're going to try to focus that on as much as possible, making sure that team members are working solo. And also where we can't, we're going to make sure the social distancing is in place. We're going to have clean teams in all of our facilities. And so that's going to be a part of the ongoing effort. Another things we're looking at to protect the team members and our customers and guests. As I said, we're asking as much as possible to do all transactions online. But if you come into the facilities, all the facilities are going to be cashless. And even on the credit card machines, we have this device that we purchased where you don't actually touch the buttons. I guess it's a plastic overlay or some type of overlay that can be cleaned. And so those are the type of things we're looking at. Going back to one of the points I made is when I said there's no food and beverages, we will not be providing that. Someone can bring in their own beverages, their Gatorade or whatever they may be. But that's some of the things we're definitely going to be focusing on.
Thank you. And maybe this last question for today would be for both Matt and Karen. And so, and that's obviously would be coming at direction perhaps of maybe your legal departments or something, but it says, how would you handle enforcement of mask wearing in your buildings? If someone refuses, do you plan on escorting them out? But just kind of maybe as you have those conversations around what to do if someone does not want to wear a mask, and kind of what are you hearing or guidance that you're receiving or what have you?
Well, as we've said a couple of times, this situation is very fluid, and the answer to this question today may be different a month from now, 2 months from now, a year from now. What we anticipate doing when this stay-at-home order is lifted and people are back in the office, we will have security guards stationed in each of the lobbies of our buildings. It's Howard Hughes policy that on Howard Hughes property, everyone is expected to wear a mask. The security people stationed within each building will have a limited supply of masks available. If someone comes to the building without a mask, they will offer them a mask for their use. However, at the same time, they're security guards, they're not police, and they're not there to enforce anything. So they can recommend, they can suggest, they can inform them of our policy that everyone on Howard Hughes properties wears a mask. But at a certain point, if someone refuses to wear a mask, there's only so much a security guard can do. So I would say, that's really the extent that we will be going to is offering them if they show up without a mask on the property.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback.
Anything you'd add?
Yeah, we kind of are right on tune with each other through most of this, and I think a lot of it's we've been in the industry a long time and have seen a lot of these. Well, not this type of situation, but we do we certainly do have similar practices, let's say. But I agree with her 100%. It's hard. We don't have that authority really to tell people that they're not allowed in, and we're going to just through abundant communication with our tenants to please remind them, tell all their employees, visitors, please help us. We're in this together with our tenants, and we know it's going to be challenging, and we need to navigate this together.
Yeah, exactly. Now more than ever, I think my closing thought is now more than ever, we all have to work together. Owners of properties, tenants of properties, everyone that's involved in being in and around any kind of facility really just needs to work together and be respectful and courteous in every way that we can be to each other.
Excellent. And so I think with that probably gives us a good ending note. And so I want to thank Milton, Nick, Karen, and Matt for sharing with us this afternoon, and hopefully you all have found this helpful. Again, as I stated earlier, if there are portions that maybe you may have missed something, we will be posting this online at some point later today. Also want to just share with you some upcoming sessions that will, again, pertain to preparing to open. And so, again, we've touched on liability concerns. Again, that was our first one. Today was on facilities management. The next one, which will actually be this Thursday, will be related to behavioral and mental health. And so certainly as our many employees and business owners have been away and obviously have been impacted in some form or another, we'll be talking about different resources that businesses can have to assist them with their employees as they start coming back to work, other things you can look for. Again, in some instances, if there is evidence of substance abuse and so forth. And then next week, we will move and talk about education and childcare. Again, also two big issues that businesses will have to be able to continue to navigate around over the next several months. And so lastly, we have not issued or put out anything public, but you can say you heard it here first. Next Wednesday on May 27th, from 12:30 to 1:30, we'll have County Executive Calvin Ball, who will be with us. And basically, we'll be having a question and answer session around businesses opening up in Howard County. I know that many of you have had questions around what can you do, what can't you do, why can't you open, when can you open? And so we'll have County Executive Ball with us again on May 27th from 12:30 to 1:30, and details to come. And so again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you for your continued support. Please stay safe and have a great rest of the day.